Thank you for that warm welcome, and we haven't even done anything yet. My goodness, what a nice group of humans. I'm Robert McBride from All Classical Portland. More importantly, this is Carlos Kalmar.
You always say that more importantly.
It's because it's always
Hi.
true.
Come on.
He's the music director of the Oregon Symphony. And again, he has put together an interesting program tonight.
Yes.
I mean, the Slavonic dances by Dvorak are delightful, but I've never seen a concert where somebody played a whole set of them, and you're going to do the whole second half, right? The whole second set.
Actually, first of all, I'm very, very happy that avid concert goers, members of the Oregon Symphony, so to speak, you already heard a set of the Slavonic dances, meaning he wrote 2 sets. And this is the second set. I think.
Did you do the first set here before?
Yes.
Where was I? I don't know.
I don't know.
I missed out again. I've missed so many good things.
No, it was probably not so memorable.
Oh, well, maybe tonight will be better. Good luck. And I just learned, walking out here, that you've decided to reorder them?
Well, that's a little much. The thing is, we played this on Friday evening in Salem.
Right.
And I already had kind of a feeling. You know, when you play something like this, when you play 8, they are 8 Slavonic dances. And you remember actually the first set, and you remember how the first set ends. And the first set, Opus 46, which made Dvorak very famous, ends in fast glory, let me say that, the G minor. It's the number 8. It's the ending. It's very clear, fast-paced, boom. So I rehearsed it, of course, in the order, and we played it in Salem in the order. And it's not that the Salem audience didn't actually like it. They actually applauded after a few of them. But the reality is that the way it works, number 8 is a little more inward and not one of those, hey, let's go and stomp the earth. So I said, you know what, let's just change the last 2. That's all. So it's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 7. That's what we play.
Let's hope all of the members of the orchestra got that memo.
Well, it will be interesting.
It will be very interesting. Yes. I didn't know until recently that in the Opus 46 set, the sequence that Dvorak stipulated is different in the original piano version than it is in the orchestrated version.
Which, of course, gives you an opportunity to say, hey, actually, he doesn't care.
He'd be happy that you're paying attention.
Yeah,
to
we are playing the work.
Absolutely.
And yes, it's true that you hear a set of this rarely, if ever. You sometimes hear, you're going, I mean, if you're a fan of Antonin Dvorak, what you're going to recognize maybe 2 of the dances. The others, no. You're probably going to recognize number 1, the first that we played tonight, and you for sure are going to recognize number 2. That's one of the absolute stunningly best he ever wrote. And then comes 6 others that are also stunningly the best he ever wrote, but not so popular.
The third one actually quotes a folk song that has to do with bandits in the woods robbing people. Isn't that charming?
Love it. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
You're changing my interpretation.
Ah, well, you know, ladies, hang on to your purses in the F major dance number 3. You never know what might happen. First half of the concert is very different and absolutely wonderful. A piece I've never heard in concert, my favorite, Sibelius Tapiola, the last major thing that he wrote. I like it because to me, it's relatively abstract for Sibelius, and it makes me wonder what he might have done if he'd kept writing, which he chose not to do, decided not to do. He was about my age when he wrote that stuff. Bartok as well, around 60 when he wrote his last piano concerto, the Concerto number 3, which is such a beautiful piece. And I haven't heard it in years. Played the timpani part in college, but I bet you Greeny's going to do a better job. I would bet my life on that, actually. But so the beginning of the concert, Tapiola, in Finnish mythology, Tapio is the god of the forest. And the forest looms large in Finnish culture and the hearts of Finns, much as the forest does for us in this part of the United States, though we don't have these mysterious gods dwelling in the forest. So it's a little Wagnerian in that respect, though it doesn't really sound like Wagner. It's kind of like a forest equivalent of Debussy's La Mer, representing the ocean. This is the forest.
Yeah. Well, the thing, an interesting thing, on Friday when we were in Salem, we do a pre-concert talk there too, and I did it with our resident conductor Paul Kim, which is great fun. Also because all of a sudden you have two conductors, and same as with Robert, we just go out and talk.
And you two probably don't agree on anything, right?
That's the fun part. Because he started out talking about Tapiola, and that it also reminds one of the forests and woods surrounding Sibelius' home, and all of that. And I listened to him and thought like, okay. And then I said, well, that might all be true, but in terms of beauty and wonderfulness and all of that, I don't want to be in that forest at all.
It is a little scary. It's a dark place.
It's this piece is. Sometimes music is not about beauty. It's about something else. And although Tapiola by Sibelius has some beauty in it, it's not about beauty at all. It's actually a scary, dark, brooding piece. And it might have something to do with the state of mind in which Sibelius was at that time. Mainly, so Sibelius was at that time one of the most famous composers on the planet, no question. And so the music director of New York, what is today New York Philharmonic, Walter Damrosch, asked Sibelius to write a piece for the Philharmonic. And he said, you can write whatever you want. And Sibelius was very happy, but he struggled. The interesting point in Sibelius, as maybe happens more than you think, is whenever you think about an artist who is incredibly successful and revered, has no financial problems, lives in a country that is as beautiful as Finland, you think, happy life, wonderful. Sibelius was a mess. First of all, he was doubting his abilities all the time. And second, which was his biggest problem, he was an alcoholic, heavy alcoholic. And he very often spent his nights writing music and drinking. And that is, so it's kind of, everybody in Finland knows that his wife, Aino, she found him every morning sleeping on the porch, completely passed out, and maybe some music there. And the sad thing is, okay, he writes Tapiola, and he probably had a reason to write it. The sad thing is, at that time, he was already writing on his Symphony No. 8. And very often it was kind of already announced in the newspaper, the premiere of Symphony No. 8 by Sibelius, which is the newest piece by the Grand Master, is not far, never happened. And he drank more and more, and one day he made a pile in front of his house of stuff and burned probably every music that he had written in years, including probably No. 8. The Symphony No. 8 doesn't exist. So the last piece is Tapiola, and the interesting point is, I don't know, I'm not so good in history, but Jean Sibelius lived long after he wrote Tapiola, a long life in complete silence, didn't write a piece. And Tapiola is about the god Tapio, god of the forests, is antique mythology. It's also mentioned in the Finnish national epos, the Kalevala, and Tapiola is the domain, and it's full of very moody spirits. And if, as a human, you approach these woods, strange things will happen to you. And so is the music. It's full of brooding darkness. It draws you in. It takes you in and doesn't let you go. And here and there tortures you with its the thing is, what the music does, it's not always the most pleasant thing, but the piece itself is one of the best pieces of the 20th century. It's an amazing piece of very intense 17 minutes, something like that, and then it's over.
It's a rare opportunity to hear it. So thank you, and let's enjoy Tapiola by Sibelius. He wasn't only an alcoholic, he was also a very depressed person. He suffered from depression a lot and that crippling self-doubt. And then so much of 20th century music was going in different directions that he wasn't interested in, and he felt like nobody cared about him anymore. He was crying in his beer, except it was whiskey.
Well, the thing is that actually even Olin Downs, critic in New York, created a controversy because all of a sudden Downs championed Sibelius. And at that time, actually music was going in a different direction, and everybody accused Sibelius of, you are not modern enough, you're looking backwards, and Sibelius couldn't care less. Music, for me, as a conductor who has, of course, during the long years of conducting, I have done a lot of 20th century music, and one of the most fascinating things is it's everywhere. I mean, there is just the ones that we get to play here. On one side there is Stravinsky, on the other there is Mahler, then is Richard Strauss. Claude Debussy takes in a very different direction. Sibelius is very Finnish. And then all these experimental people that are there, etc., etc. The list is endless. 20th century, fascinating century.
Yeah, truly. And from the 20th century, from the 1940s, the Piano Concerto No. 3 by Bela Bartok. He was dying of leukemia when he wrote it. In fact, he didn't quite finish it. A friend of his had to do the last 17 measures. He wrote it for his wife, who was a fine pianist, as a surprise gift for her, and also as something that he hoped that she would be able to perform and earn some money when he was gone. It's lighter in spirit than a lot of his music. It's easier to listen to, it's sweeter. The second movement, he marked andante religioso, and it's very serene much of the time. And it has bird calls, which are really fun. And it's a beautiful, beautiful piece.
He only wrote 3 piano concertos, but whenever I am being asked, okay, we have this pianist who would like to play Bartok, which one do you want him to play? I always say number 3. Although number 1 and number 2 are incredibly interesting. Number 2 is an amazing piece. But number 2 and number 1 are more in the style of Bartok, where he usually is, which is more in your face, more rhythmically, more, I wouldn't say more interesting, but more obvious. This intricate rhythmical things and the music with huge energy, and sometimes he blows up the place. And then he writes number 3, and the interesting thing is he was not only dying of leukemia at that time. This all happened actually in the United States, where he had to emigrate. And when Bela Bartok, who was a very famous man, emigrated to the United States, he had no money, no work, nobody was interested in him, nothing. He was dirt poor, barely making it. And then, of course, came leukemia on top of that. So it was so miserable. And then, of course, as the story goes, At that time came mainly Serge Kouzevitsky, the music director of Boston Symphony, and asked him to write a concerto for orchestra, and then he kind of found his inner strength, wrote this piece, which is one of the best pieces of the 20th century again. And at that time, Bela Bartok was so happy about any little piece we could write that he got paid for, that was commissioned, because he needed to kind of pay his bills. And in the middle of that, he writes number 3, Concerto for his wife. And I think that alone is so sweet. He did not really say that it is for his wife, but of course it is for his wife. And that is a sweet thought. And I cannot stress enough the importance of something that I actually don't really know what it means, because he didn't explain it. Why Bartok, who was actually in his work as a musician and composer not into religion at all, why he writes Andante Religioso as the kind of characterization for the second movement? I read one article which, if it's not true, it's actually a cute idea, that more than a century before Bartok, there was this guy named Beethoven, whom we all revere, who also recovered from health issues and wrote a piece, Danksagung. It's kind of a saying thank you. That's the title of the piece. It's a long title in German. Anyway, and maybe Bartok at that time was happy to actually be alive and writes this second movement, which is, in my mind, the deepest music Bartok has ever written. And if he would have written the music only, so the second movement, which is the slow movement, has this very normal classical structure, part A, part B, part A. Part A and A are actually a chorale. It's like being in church. And B is actually something that Bartok simply loves. Bartok was famous for writing what he always called night musics, things that he listens at night. You have it in so many pieces that he writes. It of course exists in the Concerto for Orchestra. So there is a tiny little bit, maybe 2 minutes of night music, in this case, as Robert said, with bird calls in the night. And then he retracts to this religious andante. And then at the end, the last movement is kind of what you expect, meaning virtuosic, high speed, lots of fun, gives the soloist a real possibility for a great display of his abilities. And of course, we are very happy that we can welcome on the stage Jean-Philippe Collard, who is undoubtedly a leading pianist of our times. Great guy.
And unlike Tapiola by Sibelius and the second set of Dvorak Slavonic dances, the orchestra has actually played the Bartok Third Piano Concerto before, but those first and last things they'd never done before, so way to go. I've never seen Jean-Philippe Collard perform. I know his recordings. What's he like? French, elegant?
Very French. Jean-Philippe is a delight. We have worked quite a bit together. He's very funny, and very French in the sense that he is actually a great artist, plays in this concerto, not to say too much, but he plays colors that are astonishing. And something about him is always laid back. This laissez-faire de French, come on. Yeah, I can't explain it even better. Tall man, towering. Yeah, he's one of my favorite soloists. I've done a lot of things. And anyway, I had to bring him here to Oregon, first of all, because I have to bring somebody like him to Oregon. And second, I owed him. So the story is that he was my soloist in, I forgot where, somewhere here in the United States. I was guest conducting, And my account of the story is Jean-Philippe has, amongst other recordings, he recorded all 5 chansons, piano concerto, and which chanson piano concerto are being played, number 2 extensively, number 5 here and there. And I thought, come on, let's play number 3. So I asked, and he said yes. I go and meet him for rehearsal, and he looks at me, kind of smiling but grumpy, and says, "You forced me to learn number 3 again." He was like, "Why did you do that?" Because number 3, nobody asks for that piece. It's actually a good piece of music, but nobody asks for it. So he learned it for kind of me. And he said, "You owe me." And I said, "Okay, fine. Glad to bring you."
Possibility of an encore, or is Bartok enough?
For me, Bartok is enough. But I never tell my soloists anything. Never. That is always up to the soloist whether she feels, etc. And essentially, with the set of 8 Slavonic dances, you get that's a nightcap, a large one. It's actually, the interesting point is it's not even so long. The 8 Slavonic dances are over in 38, 39 minutes. But boy, that's great music. The thing is with the Dvorak Slavonic dances is, talking about a person who was dirt poor. There was this Antonin Dvorak, nobody knew him, dirt poor, viola player, just barely making it in Czechoslovakia back in the old days. And then Johannes Brahms discovered him and said to his publisher, said, "You have to take this young man. There is so much talent." And the publisher knew Johannes Brahms well, and Johannes Brahms was definitely a guy who would not say anything positive about another composer if it wouldn't be really worth it. So Fritz Zimrock takes up Dvorak and publishes a little, I think it was a violin duet. It does fairly well, and so Zimrock says, "You have to write some Slavonic dances." So he wrote Dvorak, the first set, which we played 4 or 5 years ago here. It was a bestseller. Zimrock made so much money on that. Yeah, he did. And of course, Zimrock, a businessman, goes back to Dvorak maybe a few years later and says, "Anton, you have to write another set of Slavonic dances." And Dvorak said, no way. Because Dvorak said, "You cannot repeat that." It was so successful, if I even attempt to write another a sequel, it will be way harder. It's like in the movies. You know, the first movie is always the sequel. Always. If it's not The Godfather. Well, different thing. But finally Dvorak writes this, and he asked 10 times as much as for the first set, because at that time he was already famous, and the second set is as good as the first. Why is it not more popular? No idea. Only idea I have about that is it's a little more sophisticated and certainly more introverted. There is something melancholic. I mean, there are the dances that you kind of expect of Dvorak Slavonic dances, which is high speed, energy, and rocks the house. 4 of them are like that, but 4 of them are not. And 4 of them are little more, some of them are really wonderfully like Dvorak thinking about something and being a little sad here and there. Wonderful, astonishing music. And after doing this set, I must say that, yes, there is so much music in the classical music world that it is really difficult to choose, but shame on all of us, meaning all my colleagues and myself, for not doing the sets more often. Audience always grateful for such an amazing music.
Now, don't you want to hear it? I do. What about those late tone poems by Dvorak? Some of his last orchestral works.
What can I tell you? As you know, I know that you always say, yeah, Carlos is such a fan of Brahms. I'm an absolute Dvorak freak because, you know, I'm not Czech, I'm not Slavic, none of that. For a non-guy, I've done more Dvorak than probably the 95% of the normal conductors, if that even exists. I have conducted of Dvorak, not all the symphonies, I'm guilty, but quite a few, more than the average. I've done all symphonic poems, I've done weird stuff like, I've done all the legends. Who knows that Dvorak wrote legends? Fantastic.
We
music.
play them on the radio, but I've never come across them in
That's
concert.
why you have to listen on to this radio station, etc., etc. Dvorak. I love him.
I love him too. Thank you for doing all that. So this is going to be a really interesting concert. Kind of dark and foreboding at the beginning, but intellectually stimulating. This piano concerto that so perfectly balances virtuosity and flash and dash with tenderness and serenity and love for the composer's wife. And then after intermission, just too much fun with a little bit of melancholy.
That's exactly what it is.
Wow. Thanks for coming. Robert McBride.
Carlos Kalmar.
Carlos Kalmar. And you.